Hello everyone. I wanted to walk you through a tutorial on both melee combat and enemy health inside of Unity. So to get started, what we're going to need to do first is import an attack animation. So if you go to that plaque that I put on Moodle of animations, we can go to our scene view, our assets, and import new asset. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to wherever you put that folder, 2D pixel art character template. And then we are going to use this sword attack as our animation. There's a lot more attack animations in here, so play around with whichever one you would like, but we're going to start with this one for this tutorial. So player sword attack 64 by 64.png. Go ahead and import that. So by default, this is 64 by 64, but I think to keep it in line with our other animations, we're going to take this and put it in the animations folder. Well, the other ones are at 48. So even though usually I would put the pixels per unit on this at 64, I'm going to make it 48 for this one, just so everything's at the same size. And then once it's in here, I'm going to do my standard setup for pixel imports, so point no filter, and then compression none. And then once I have everything like this, I'm going to hit apply. And then I need to go in and slice this to the right size. So I'm going to go open sprite editor. In my sprite editor, kind of like normal, I'm going to go slice, grid by cell size. And then here, I actually do want it to stay at 64 by 64 because that's what we want to cut them out as. So over here, pixels per unit, 48. Over here, 64. So slice. Looks good. We'll hit apply. At this point, I do have my animation. You can see all of the frames are sliced out correctly. So now I'm going to go up to my my animation window. So animation. I'm going to go ahead and make a new animation here. We'll go my player variants. Down here, fall, idle, jump, run, create new clip. You can just call this attack. And go ahead and save. And at this point, I'm going to click this plus for animation here, left click, hold down the shift key, left click the last one to grab all of the frames and drag them up. Very similar to what we've done with all of our animations so far. Preview it real fast. Play a little quick. Maybe we drag it out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Go 5. Maybe put this out like, see what 25 looks like. That's pretty good, I think. All right, stop that. So that's our basic animation imported and set up. At this point, you can exit out of the animation folder, because we should have that attack available down here at this point. Now we want to go ahead and set up our animation tree for this. So to do that, go to Window, Animation, Animator. You can see that we have this attack one that's popped up. Now, by default, we actually don't need to make a blend tree for this because we're not blending between anything in particular. If you had a more complex attack set, you might want to put them in a blend tree, like to put all your attacks in one place. But for now, we can actually just leave this like it is. What we do need to do is set up our transitions to work with our jump and our run animation. So what we're going to do is go ahead and drag your attack to the left of jump. You can drag your any state and idle run to the middle too. And what we're going to do is we're going to click any state, right click, say make transition, drag to attack, go to attack, right click, make transition, drag it to idle run. So what you end up with is kind of this like diamond shaped, comes to the top. First thing, double click on attack, You see that we have this loop time checked. Go ahead and uncheck that because we only want it to play once when the player attacks. The second thing is we'll need a new Boolean. So if you go up here and hit plus, let's do it plus bool. We're going to set up a Boolean called is attacking. Just like that, lowercase I, capital A. We'll leave that parameter over here. So basically what we want to say for our logic setup, and if you haven't done this, sorry, I might have made a change to how I set up the blending on this. Go here to your transition to jump. Your settings down. If it has exit time is checked, go ahead and uncheck that. If fixed duration is checked, go ahead and uncheck that. And you want to set your transition duration percent to 0.25. Just make sure everything looks like mine. And then for this arrow, jump to idle run, make sure fixed duration is checked and it's 0.25. So it should look like this. And here, we want to set things up the same way. So I'm going to turn off fixed duration. Oh, and then this is important. Make sure can transition to self is also turned off. Both of these. Okay. So can transition to self is turned off. Looks good. And then on top here, as exit time is turned off, fixed duration is on and 0.25 to transition. I might need to turn this off, but we'll see how it's looking first. The next thing we want to do is we want to need to add in our conditions. So I've clicked on this bottom arrow. You can see it's highlighted in blue. And I want to set a plus, and I want to say is attacking is true to trigger this attack animation. And then if we are no longer attacking, I want to set this to is attacking is false. So is attacking is false. Also, there is another one I want to set up here eventually. Let me see, maybe we can do it now. Let's see if it breaks our character. So we also want to add this to the jump animation because what I want to do is that I want the attack animation to override the jump animation if it's happening. So basically, if you're in the air, I still want to see that attack animation, and that means I have to turn off the jump animation. So adding this plus down here, we want to say is attacking is false. Basically, the idea is that if I'm attacking, I can't play my jump animation. Let's see if my stuff still works. So let me go back to my scene, my game, plus. Okay, so it is freaking out a little bit. Makes sense. That's what it's trying to do, is it's trying to play that first animation and it keeps saying that it's false. But this will get corrected later once we put in our variables, so we can leave it here for now. We go back into our scene view, just to preview. We should be ready for the next step at this point. So the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to open back up our animation editor. So come here to Windows, Animation, Animation. Click on your player variant or your player prefab. Come down to our new attack animation. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to add something called an animation event here. Before we do that, though, we need to write our script. So let's go into our player. So keep this in mind for right now, for our animation event, but right now we're going to go in and write a script. So if we go back to our assets scripts, you can go ahead and open up your player movement script, because this is where we are going to do this. And basically, we want to tell Unity when to trigger this attack animation. So what I'm going to do for this is we have our input for our jump, and our input for our movement. We're going to do another input as well. We're going to say if input dot get mouse button down. Okay, this one. And then we're going to set, it's already giving us an autofill to 0. That is what we want, because in Unity, 0 is the key for the left mouse button. So if the left mouse button is clicked, we're going to do something. And in this case, we're going to go into the animator and we're going to say animator.set bool. Our boolean is called isAttacking. And then we're going to tie that to a new variable we're going to set up here in a second called isAttacking. By default, it's not going to let us do it because we haven't written the variable yet, but we'll just write it out. And then we'll go up to the top and I'm going to make a new line and I'm going to go ahead and put a comment and I'm going to say attack variables. I'm going to say public bool is attacking, like that. And now if we go back into our input, this should be correct. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And if I jump back in here, let's let it load for a sec. And hit play. You see, by try clicking, nothing is happening quite yet. And that's because within here, oops, let me bring this back up. Accidentally exited out of it. In here, we never set isAttacking to true when we put the mouse button down. So we'll say isAttacking equals true, like this. Now let's go back and try. Now if I hit play, it's still not going on. Let's take a look and see. I was taking a look back through my code real fast. I think to simplify my code, I'm going to try something else. Rather than do Boolean for this, I'm going to just bypass it and then say, if the mouse button down, animator set bool is attacking is just true. We don't need to make a specific Boolean for it. And I'll take this one out up top here. I think this will just keep things simple. If I come back into my Unity, give it a sec. Okay. And I'm like my animator first. Here. It could be that I have this set to is jumping by accident. So make sure that this is attacking equals true. All right, now let's go back and see. And there we go. So we play our animation, but the second we play it, we kind of get stuck in it. And the reason for that is that we don't have a way to exit it as of yet. We haven't turned isAttacking off to false. So until we make isAttacking false, we'll be stuck in this animation forever. So the way that we're actually going to do this is with something called an animation event. Remember I talked about it a while back? And we're going to set that up in our script right now. So if we come back into our script, we go all the way to the bottom. So the first one we had this animator set bool is attacking true. Oops. I want to copy that. And we come down here all the way to the bottom. I'm going to put in a new function called public void. We'll call it something like inAttack. And then all we're going to do in here is we're going to put in animator set bool is attacking, and then we'll set it to false instead. Make sure it's public. That's going to be very important for this next step. All right, so it's just going to look like this: public void inAttack animator.setBool is attacking false. And we don't need to declare it anywhere in our script because we're going to declare it somewhere else with an animation event. So if I come up to our animation window, so window, animation, animation, I click on our player prefab, and we set this to attack. What we can do in here is if we go to the very last keyframe and hover over it, which is where we're getting stuck, we can add what's called an event to this part of the animation. So when I hit plus, if you look on top, you can see that we now have this marker right here for an animation event. I'm going to click on that, and over here in your inspector, you're going to see that I now have the ability to call a function based off of this event that I put on my last frame. So I'm going to come here, revise player movement, methods, and you see every public function that I've put in there, I can call right here. And I can go ahead and call this end attack function that I just wrote. I'm going to click that. Basically, the idea is as soon as the attack finishes executing, it's going to set that Boolean that we put in our animator to false, and we can continue forward with our animation. We'll stop that. I'll go ahead and click out. Let's take a look and see if that's true. So I click plus, and you see we do. We do go back to idle animation or run, depending which we're in. We jump, we can attack in the air, and we come back down, and everything looks like it's working pretty smoothly. And now that you cannot spam the attack, it won't restart whenever you hit play. You have to wait for the attack to finish because of where we put that event in our animation window. All right. So next, we're going to go ahead and start putting in the logic for this. At this point, we need to go ahead and start writing in our attack logic for how we're actually going to decide how we hit the enemies that we're going to be fighting. So if you want, go ahead and go back into your player movement script that we've been working on. You can go ahead and bring this up. So what we've been doing here is we had our end attack function. We're going to write a new one. You can actually put it above it. Just put it right here. We're going to also call this public void attack. This is what we're going to put in our attack logic. So the way that we're basically going to do this is we're going to draw a collider 2D, and then if there is an enemy that is overlapping that collider, when we click our button, then we are going to attack it. So we're going to register that it's been hit. The best way I have found to do this, I have just used simple colliders in the past, but there is a method inside of Unity Physics 2D called overlap circle all, which basically lets you. The advantage of this is that if there are multiple enemies under this circle, it's going to register all of them. So the way I've done it in the past has had issues with that, where it's only detected one. So we're going to do things that look a little bit different, but I'll talk through why we're making those decisions. So the first thing we're going to do is set up a collider 2D array. So if we're doing an array, we use square brackets. An array is a collection of things inside of Unity. So in this case, it's going to be a collection of collider 2Ds. So like, again, if there were like 4 enemies that are overlapping the collider that we're setting up here, then they will all be registered as being hit instead of just one, because the way I've done it in the past, it's only been able to save that one value. So we're going to say collider 2D, and we'll say enemy, just setting up our variable for our array, because you have to give an array a name, just like any other variable. We're going to say equals, and then here's the physics method that I talked about earlier. So we're going to go physics 2D, and then we're going to call our method, which is overlap circle all, which is what you see here. And then we need to give it some parameters. So the first one is we need to set a point for this to happen to. So if you look right here, it's asking you for a vector 2. And this is just basically where we are going to create our collider that's going to register if any enemies are there. So we're going to call it maybe attack point. I'll say dot transform dot position. And just like we did with our platforms, we're going to set a transform with a game object in a second. Then it needs a radius. So we'll just say radius. This is just going to be how big our collider is to find the boundaries if there are any enemies in it. And the last thing it's going to want actually is a layer mask. So you see there, layer mask. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new enemy layer mask. So basically, that if it is an enemy and it's declared in our game object, it won't do anything unless the game object we are overlapping has an enemy layer on it. So we'll say enemies. We haven't set up any of these things, so you're going to get a bunch of errors here. We will go ahead and set them up now. So the first thing we need to do is set up this attack point variable. Then we need to set up this radius. And then lastly, we need to set up this enemy's layer mask. So I'm going to come up here to the top. Under attack variables, this is where we're going to start setting these up. So I'm going to set up public. We're going to say game object for this because I'm going to put in an empty game object, and we're going to say attack point. Set below. Next, we're going to come up here and we're going to say public float. We're going to say radius for how large the collider is. And then lastly, we're going to come up and say public layer mask. We're going to call it enemies, like this. Okay. So that should provide everything. And if we come down here, you see that we no longer have errors on these because we've assigned them each a variable. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use a for each loop. So basically, this is what's taking all of the enemies in the array, and it's going to assign the hit to all of them, regardless if it's 1 or 100 enemies that are under the collider. So we're going to say for each, because it's for each item in that overlapping array. We're going to say collider 2D. We'll say enemy, and then we'll give it a little bit more specific. We'll say enemy game object. Every game object that is in the enemy tag. And enemy. So if there were other types of objects in there, it wouldn't care. It only cares about game objects. And then we're going to say lubricants. So for loops work just like if statements are functions. You call them, you put the parameters in the parentheses, and then you put whatever happens in the call lubricants. And for now, let's just put in something for debugging. So we can say debug log hit enemy, just to see if it's working. In a second, we're going to put in like animations for when we strike the enemy, and we can put them in here. But for right now, we just want to see if it's working. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So at this point, I'm going to come back to my Unity editor, and we're going to start setting this stuff up. Give me a second to load. And then here, we're going to come down to my player movement script. And you're going to see I'm missing an attack point, radius, and this enemy's layer tag. Oh, I think I already set it up for last time. Wow. Let me go in my layers. Get that out of here. So we're going to put it in just a second. From here, the first thing we want to do is we want to set up this kind of attack point, like where the attack is going to register from. So, plus, we're going to create an empty game object. We can call it attack point. We're going to drop it underneath the player so that it moves around with them. Now that I have this attack point selected, over here by scene, I'm just going to kind of drag it somewhere in front of the player. Maybe like right here. And I'll leave it there for now. All right, so now I can go back in and drag it over. So come down to where you wrote your player script, where the attack point is missing, grab that game object, and drag it and drop it right here. Next thing is we need to set a radius for this. We'll say 0. Let's make it something like 0.5. Now, there's a problem all of a sudden, and that's that we cannot see our radius. So we'll need to fix that in a second. So in order to be able to visualize it, we're going to add another part to our script here. So to do that, and be able to actually see where anything is. We're going to come back into our script. Just bring it up. We're going to come to the very end. We're going to set up a new script to take care of this. So we can call this one a private because it's basically doing a function for me. We're going to do void. We're going to use a pre-built one inside of Unity called on draw gizmos. We're just going to say here is we're going to say gizmos dot draw wire sphere, and here at the bottom. And then we're going to give it a position where it's going to be located. So we'll say attack point transform position, and then we'll say radius for the boundaries of the sphere. And so basically, those two variables that we made earlier, that game object attack points, and then the radius are what we're going to pass on down here to basically draw and be able to see it. So let me save this. This should be all that we've written here. We're going to go back into our Unity scene. And we should see now at this point, because we have that script in there, even in our scene view, we should have a representation of where our attack collider is and how big it is. So if I go to my player variant and I scroll up the radius, we should see it get bigger and smaller. So we can use this to tweak kind of how our attack looks. All right, from this point, now what we need to do is set up the animation so that it calls the function at a certain point in the animation, and we need to set up an enemy so that we can see if it's working with the enemy layer. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up my animation window. So if I come down to Window, Animation, Animation, we're actually going to add another animation event. So rather than call the attack script, that attack function we wrote in the script, we're actually going to call it from here. So we're going to come up here to attack, and then I'm going to actually scrub through my animation. So make sure that you have the animation window open here and then the scene view. And I'm going to kind of see that it seems like the frame with the most impact is this one right here, this kind of big slash in the middle. And then what I can do at this point is I can take my attack point and I can kind of try to reposition it. So it's kind of like right in the middle of wherever I want that attack to feel. I can push it forward a little bit, and you can resize it as well. And so making sure that this attack point works well with this frame in the animation will be important for making sure that it works correctly. Also, if you have an attack with like a really big windup, you don't want that function to be called during the whole attack, right? You don't want it to be called like when you're charging back here and then you do this big overhead slash. But then if an enemy's in front while you're charging up, you still hit them. You want it to happen on a specific frame, and that's what we're doing right here. So I found my frame, and then I'm going to come up here to the top, and I'm going to add an event just on this one frame. And I'm going to come down here like I did last time. New function selected, come to revise player movement, methods, and then I want to grab that attack function that we grabbed. And I want to put it on that event. So now what this is saying is that anytime that we hit this frame in this animation, it's going to call that function and check to see if we hit an enemy. And then you can go ahead and close it. So now what we need is an enemy, right? So for this, I'm just going to make a cube. We'll say plus 2D object, sprite, square. We don't even really need much on it at this point. I'm just going to drag it over here somewhere. There's a couple things we need to do and put on it. The first thing is because we're using physics 2D, we need some kind of 2D collider. I'll just say box collider 2D. I'll just leave it at that. The second thing we need to do is we need to add its layer, our enemy layer. We need to click there and make sure that it's marked as an enemy, because otherwise nothing will happen since we're checking for enemies. The final thing we need to do is go to our player, come down to the script, and we still haven't assigned a layer mask to this enemy's role. So we'll come down here, our enemy layer mask that we put in. you haven't put it in, remember all you need to do, go up here to layer, add layer, and then put in your layer here, enemy. So it's on the enemy, layer script, it's enemy layer mask assigned. Let's give it a shot and see if it works. Remember, we have that debug script in, so if it does work, we should see something when we click. All right, so nothing here, because we're not overlapping. Still aren't hitting. Then boom, hit enemy, hit enemy, hit enemy. We're only doing it once, which is try from the other side. Since it's updating, you just check this little number. If it goes up, you're performing it. It looks like it is working. So we are detecting the enemy. Back here, trying to make sure that it feels right within the detection radius. Yeah, it seems good. All right, so cool. Everything seems like it's working. So now what we need to do is that this is basic. This is the basics of how to set up a melee attack and how to check for an enemy done. So you would do this for any attack you made, and then you would just customize it based on kind of the parameters we had here. Like you might give it a different attack point, you might put it at a different place in the animation, you could set up your animation tree, with a different Boolean. So if this was like fast attack, if we had like a running attack or a jumping attack, we would have to make like is jumping attack. We'd have to check for other things like are you jumping, currently. But for now, this is the basics of how to set up an attack. Okay, so now we need to go in and make our health script and then set up our health script for the enemy. So let's do that in just a second. So the first thing that we're going to need to do to set up an enemy health script that we can take advantage of and deal damage to this enemy that we've made is make a script for them. So we're going to come into project, scripts, make a new script, model behavior script, and we can call it something like enemy damage, something like that. So once you've made it, go ahead and double click on it. We're going to start setting up our script. I'm going to drag it up here so we can see. All right, so at this point, we're going to need a variable. This is the simplest one. This is actually a pretty simple script given what we're doing. We're going to say public float, we'll say health. We don't need to see enemy health necessarily because we could actually reuse this for lots of things down the line. You could reuse this for player health at some point too if you wanted to. So we'll just start it with health now. Then we're going to come down to the update and we're going to say if health is less than or equal to 0, you want to make sure it's less than or equal to, because if you get to negative health with it, if you say like just equal 0 and you keep hitting them, and you miss 0, they won't die. They'll just go to negative health and live forever. So if health is less than or equal to 0, we'll set in our curly brackets. We'll say debug.log enemy is dead, just so we can see what we're doing. And then we're going to set another one, like float, we'll say max health, something like this. And then we'll assign it later. All right, so this is all we're going to grab for the start. Oh, don't forget to put a semicolon down here. Apologies. This is all we're going to get, just all we need to start with. So the second thing we're going to do now is we're going to go back into our player script. Go ahead and bring that back up. Because we need a way, basically on our player script, when we attack, to subtract health from the enemy, right? So we're going to do that in just a second. Basically what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to come down here. First thing we need, is our variable. So we're going to come up here to our attack variables, and we need one for damage, right? Because we need to tell Unity how much damage we want to do every time we attack. We can set that from anywhere from 1 to 150, whatever is right for the balance and design of your game. And then we're going to scroll down to this attack function. And then we're going to reference whatever we're overlapping in this script right now. So we're going to come inside here, this for each. I'm going to go enemy game object, because remember, that's what we're overlapping and colliding. And we're going to use something that we used a lot, actually. We're going to say dot get component. And then we're going to go, we made a script. We called it, what was it, enemy damage? Enemy damage. That's it. We're going to say parentheses. Now we're going to grab a variable inside of there, and we're going to grab health. Okay, so let me walk through what we've done real fast. So basically we're saying that every time that we overlap an enemy game object with our attack, we're going to go and see what enemy game object we're overlapping. We're going to go inside that game object, and we're going to grab the script enemy damage that is attached to them. And then we're going to go and affect a variable inside that script called health. So what we're going to do to that health is subtract it, right? So we're going to say minus equals damage. So what that's going to do is it's just going to go into the script and subtract whatever our damage value is from that enemy's health. And this will work on each individual enemy, because every time you create a new enemy, it'll have a new instance of that script on it. So it'll kind of keep track of them for you as you play your game. So we'll hit save here. What we want to do is we want to kind of go ahead and set up and see if things are working. So I'll close out of this. And then I'm going to click on my square. Let's go ahead and rename it. So I'm going to rename it to enemy, like this. And then I'm going to drag my enemy damage script onto it. So right now we have health is 0 and our max health is 0. So what we'll do, we'll set our health to something like, maybe like 3. We're just going to do 1 damage each time. Let's set our max health to 3. Because at the start they should be the same, right? So this is like your maximum health all the time. This is going to be, your health is like your current health. So at the start they should be the same number, unless they got like overhealed or something like that. And then I'm going to go to my player, and I'll scroll down here to my player movement, and my damage is set to 1, which is what I want it to be. I wanted to kind of just do 1 damage at a time. So if we get this to 0 or less, it should pop up a thing that says enemy is dead. So let's test it out and see if it's working. So I've got my attacks, I come over here, boom, so I hit it, and then this should kill it. Yep, enemy is dead. And then it's just going to go forever because I put it in my update. So it's really letting us know that enemy is dead. All right, but it's working like it should at the moment. If I do it, I still get hits, but it's like, hey, it's dead. You don't need to keep hitting it. So from this point, this is pretty much working how I want it to at the moment. But there are a couple things that we can do to change this. The first is we can call animations onto the enemy that we're hitting. So for this one, I'm actually not going to use preset animations. I'm going to kind of show you another aspect of the animation and animator components inside of Unity. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear my console out, and then I'm going to click on my cube, the little enemy that I'm fighting. I'm going to come up here, Window, Animation, and let's make some animations for this enemy. So before, we've been kind of dragging sprites up here and creating them. This time we're not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and create. I want to be in my scripts, assets, animations. For my enemy animations, I'm going to say something like take damage. And save it. And then we're going to make kind of damage script for this little cube. We're going to make it from scratch here. So the idea here is that I'm going to add a property, and that goes inside of this little cube, and it shows me all of the components that are attached to it. I want to come down here to the sprite renderer, and you see that I have one for color. So if I click that, I can say plus, and right now it just goes from white to white. What I can do, if I scroll down here, is I can actually animate each of these components. So if I want to come up here to color, we have R, G, B, and A. What I can do is I can add a keyframe, add key, red and blue. And what I can do is I can just drop these down and say something like, I don't know, 0.3, 0.4. So we kind of get this like little flash. What happens, we play it, and get flashing down. So as of now, this is like way too long. So if I hit Control A, click in here, hit Control A, it's going to highlight all my stuff. I can grab this bar, I can just shrink it down real far. Just something like this, a little blip. It's like goes to red, and then it goes back to white. So we'll just leave that up there for now. And if I click on my enemy and go to the animator, you're going to see we now have this take damage animation. So we can add a condition on here. We're like plus Boolean. We'll say something like make damage. Boolean. And then, I'm sorry, totally forgot that. No, you don't want a Boolean. You want a trigger, because a Boolean is like true or false. A trigger is just if it happens, we're doing it. So we can call this take damage on a trigger. Okay. Here real fast. And we want this to come from any state. We'll say make transition, make damage, and then we're going to go on here and we're going to say settings. So no exit time, no fixed duration, and we're going to turn it off of looping because we don't want it to loop. We take it so to turn off looping, double click on it, turn off loop time like this, and then let's go back to our transition. Really, all we want to do, I'm going to go ahead and preview this. Yep. We want it to happen once if we do it, and then I'm going to bring our animator out over here so we can see what's happening. If I click play, it's going to keep flashing forever. Because we're just going from any state to take damage. So let's add that condition. And we add the take damage trigger. And you notice it doesn't give a true or false condition because it's just going to do it whenever we make it happen. So let's try again. So it flashes once because right now it's on our entry point. If we check it, you see that we call it and we kind of get this brief red flash whenever we take damage. So now to call this inside of the script, I'm going to go back in to my scripts. I'm going to my enemy damage script. Go ahead and pull that up. Okay. So we're going to put in, let's say private animator. We can just say animator. And then in here, remember we always say get component. Animator equals animator, like this. 1 second. What am I doing wrong here? Yeah, I think I just have to assign the thing. I had flipped it backwards. Apologies. My brain is off today. So it's animator equals get component. Always gotta put the variable name first. You declare it. So it should look like this. Get component animator. And then just like we've said here, we need to call in a new function. So right now we have this max health, we have our health. we need to add a bit more logic if we set this up. So right now we have health and max health. Let's change it around a little bit. Let's change this from health to current health. Lowercase c. Because my logic is a little flawed. Because health is current health. Really, health is kind of our max health. Like this is our max health to start off with. And current health is whatever it is as we go. So what we need to do is that every single time we take damage, so we need to say if health is less than current health, do something. First, we're going to say current health equals health, right? Because what this is going to do is that every single time our health goes down, like if it's ever less, we're going to make whatever our current health is our health. So we're going to just kind of keep continuously updating it. The second thing we need to do is that because our health has changed, so like our health has dropped below, we need to call our animator and then call that damage function. We can say animator dot set trigger. Before we've done set bool, but here we need to do set trigger and set floats. And then we can just say, what did we call it? Our animator, take damage. Lowercase or uppercase, that's important. Lowercase, that makes sense. Take damage, like this. And that's all we need, because we're basically just saying, hey, just flash it, and let's see what we get. So we'll go ahead and save this. Let's see if it's working. Wait for things to load. We'll hit play. So you see we do get a flash, but that's just because right now take damage is our only animation, so it's kind of flashing on entry. We could fix that just by adding an enemy idle animation or a blank animation in here to get rid of that. So right now not do anything. You come up to it, hit it, and it's not triggering. So let's take a look. Oh, just okay, there we go. But it didn't at first. I'm wondering if I need to make a change to that script. You see, we're taking damage. Every time we take damage, it flashes. So we kind of have that enemy hit going on. But it didn't at first. So let me take a look and see. So hit enemy, hit enemy. Right, so it's not doing it until we kill our enemy. So that's something that's not quite right. So if health is less than current health equals health, just thinking through things for a second. Okay. Float health, current health, matter, health is less than current health equals health. Oh, I might need to set it equal at the start because right now it doesn't have a value. So we should say current health equals health, right? Because that's like our default that we set. Okay, let me try this now. Because basically I set a value for health, but my current health is just going to default to 0 because I didn't give it a value. So I just need to set it to whatever my health was. All right, so we get the flash. Then we come over here. There we go. Yeah. So before it was just set to 0 because it's kind of the default value. So every time I attack it, flash is red. And then we need to go in and fix it from there. So the next thing that we can do is that we can set kind of a death animation. We can just do something super simple here. So if I click on my cube and go to Window, Animation, I can make a new animation for it. So create clip, and we can call it death, save. And again, remember, I can just make my own animations here. So I can add a property, transform, let's say scale. So we'll add the scale property. And basically all I'm going to do is that on the scale, I'm going to take this Y, and I'm not even going to add a new keyframe. I'm just going to come down here to this Y value. I'm going to scale it to 0. What that looks like over time is it just kind of blips out of existence, like this. And then I can set this to all, kind of shrink it down here. So we can get kind of a faster one, like maybe here. Maybe a little longer, but it doesn't really matter. Just the amount of time is that I'm scaling it down and we're setting it here to death. So what we need here is we can go ahead and close out of this. You notice we have this death animation here. And we can set up a new property, which is a Boolean. We say bool is dead. So if we're dead, play the death animation. And then what we'll need is to go from any state, make transition. We'll say here, fixed duration, so we just want to play the whole thing. And make sure we don't loop it. We might need to also turn off this transition itself, but it's fine for now. And then on this transition, we need to say if is dead is true, then we're going to trigger the death animation. And then we're just going to stay there forever. So that should be fine. So now if we go back into our script, for our enemy, let's see, if health is less than or equal to 0, we'll say animator dot set bool, and I call him dead is dead, right? Is dead. Okay. Is dead. We can just set that to true. Okay. Let's try it out. Let's see if it works. Hit play. Over here. 1, 2, 3. Not too bad. It's kind of freaking out here. It looks like what we're getting right now is that's true. Let me try turning something off here. There we go. So remember I said you might need to check can transition itself. It looks like you do need to check that. So make sure that this is unchecked. Let's try it one more time. Play. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it kind of jitters a little bit. I wonder if this is a transition issue, but we'll go from there. 2, 3. What we could do if we wanted is that we could, set it to done after the animation, but I think this is probably good enough for purposes. I'm sorry. Let's see this real fast. I'm just playing around with my timing here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then what is the duration? Go fast. I'm just going to my animation, just troubleshooting real fast. Enemy, not take damage, death. The duration of this is 15. So let's try changing that. So rather than transition duration, we'll set it to exactly what we have it set to here. So 0.15. Okay. play, troubleshoot. Oh, okay, maybe down one more. Restore offset to 0. Okay, last time, let's try it. 1, 2, 3. Still jittering a little bit. I'm wondering if it's because this is playing. So we'll say and is dead is false. So maybe something like this. Sorry, just troubleshooting on the fly. Yeah, okay, that did it. So the idea here is that basically before it was looping through because it was playing while the take damage animation was playing. So all I did was add a condition is dead equals false so that the death animation takes priority. So hit, 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 and then your enemy dies. Enemy is dead down here. And that should be it. So that's the basics of setting up an HP system, setting up melee attacks with animations, and setting up enemy damage and death animations. If you have any questions, just let me know. Went through a lot in this one. It's pretty long, but thank you for sticking with me.